Hello again, Ollie here. Today we're looking at Target for Today. I'll show you the box here. Target for Today, Bombers over the Reich, 1942 to 45. So this is a really great solo war game, very narrative driven game with a focus on delivering a great story. Relatively limited choices in this one. It's called kind of what people call a roll and write game, where essentially you just see what happens to you, and what kind of makes this worthwhile experience is the level of detail that the game provides as you run through. And you'll see in my review there are some kind of downsides to this, which makes this game a little bit, as we call in the UK, Marmite. Some people will really bounce off a game like this, but this is actually kind of what got me into the hobby in the first place. So I've got a kind of a first game love for this one, but I do really enjoy it, and I think it has a lot of strong qualities, which we'll run through. So I'm going to give you an overview of the game, and you can look forward to a playthrough as well, coming on another video. But just going to give you a bit of a view of the game itself, and just kind of the back there. You see, you've got your bombers, you've got your map, and you've got different fighters that are going to be coming in to try and give your bomber a bad day. So a bit of the historical context for this one, for Target for Today. I'll just leave the box down there. Is that you are essentially coming to defend. Your bombers are going out to do daylight raids over Europe, and they're going to be coming up in B-17s, B-24, so this is the US in World War II, coming over Germany, over France, other countries, Italy, Romania, and doing daylight bombing missions. And what that means is that the bombers are going out in big formations all together, and they're using their own guns to defend themselves against the waves of German fighters. So unlike the British, who are going at night and bombing at night, and that's a whole other game, Target for Tonight, another game by Legion here, the Americans were just like essentially facing the full Luftwaffe. And I'm not to say it wasn't dangerous for the night fighters, but sorry, for the nighttime bombers for the British, but it was a different type of danger. Very much head-on danger the Americans face. So you can imagine you're up in your B-17, it's armed to the teeth with machine guns, and you've got waves of enemy fighters coming in, and then you've got to deal with flak. So the B-17 was a tough old fighter, a tough old bomber, but there are I'm not a history expert on this, but the general consensus is there was a bit of a flawed doctrine. The daylight bombing, they thought they could precision bomb. They had something called the Norden bomb site attached to the B-17 and B-24 Liberator. I hope it's B-24. Might have got that wrong. Yeah, it is B-24. And that allowed for essentially to get a bomb in a pickle barrel from 10,000 feet. In reality, Europe's weather kind of meant that didn't happen. So there are a lot of the idea of missing civilian targets soon really wasn't that real. But nonetheless, these were impressive planes, and the kind of journey and the danger they faced. I mean, the casualties were horrendous for this one. We're looking at, if you're a bomber pilot, you almost are likely not to have returned as come back at all. So, just something to consider with this is that the bombers, I'll just have a look at the crew positions here. The bombers would be going up into above 10,000 feet up into the high altitudes, and so the bomber pilots would be going up, and the crews without they would have to wear oxygen masks to survive at that point. It's extremely cold, so you'd have to wear heated suits as well, and the game really simulates when things start going wrong. Oxygen goes out. What do? Do you descend, or do you carry on the mission? Or because someone's going to die if you don't descend, then they're just going to faint and die. Or if the heat goes out, someone's going to get frostbite. Their hands will just stick to the guns, and they'll start getting serious injuries that they won't recover from. Once there's a fire in the plane, this sort of thing. So this is an incredibly hostile environment that they're going up in, and then that's just before enemy fire starts coming in. Just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of some of the components and things like that in the game. So you've got the battle board here, and this is where most of the combat happens. You can see all the clock positions up here and around, and then you've got the plane board here, which is basically the management of the crew. And the crew, you'd normally place them in these slots, but because my camera isn't brilliant, I've just kind of kept them open so you can see the positions. So you've got the bombardier, navigator, pilot, engineer, and who's also the top gunner, co-pilot, radioman, ball gunner, left waist gunner, right waist gunner, and tail gunner. And each one has a different role and position which is affected in the game. As soon as one of them gets injured, and you'll soon feel it as your crew begins to, you don't have all positions covered, and you'll soon see how that plays out. So kind of you've got your battle board for combat, you've got your crew board here, and let's kind of go through like the whole mission, because it's a very procedural game how this works, and it's best played over a campaign. So you win by winning 25 missions, and now I've done that once on the app. So someone's made a great little app for this game, so you can just kind of play it in your own imagination on the train or something. It's not as good as playing it in real life, but it is also a good way of learning the rules because it has it all in there. I've only done 25 missions on that. In the actual game, I've probably made 5 or 6 before something's gone disastrously wrong, and I'm blown out of the sky. So that is definitely something to consider. There's kind of a high investment in this game, and if the more you put into your crew, maybe give them custom names and stuff like that, bit of background, what state they're from, that increases that investment. And and then they have to fly their 25 missions, and then they may go home. I think it increases later in the war to maybe 30 missions. How do we start then? So I'm just going to get these guides out. There's a whole load of paperwork for this game. If you love paperwork, this game is for you. So we'll start off then with the Gazzetta. So this is like a lovely bit of work. This tells you the different targets you've got. So first of all, you would pick your campaign after you've built your bomber and put your crew together. So you're going to pick a campaign. This is a very table heavy game, so if you don't like tables, I'll probably walk away now. I love them because my mind likes that sort of thing, instant turn off for some. And then you pick a campaign. So just to give you kind of a brief idea, you've got like campaign 1, it's the early war. B-17 bombing has just started. You can have an optional kind of less basic like linear formation, which is a bit more vulnerable. You have a slightly earlier version of the B-17F in this one, which has only a small machine gun at the front. And then and that's the early part of the war, mainly bombing kind of U-boat pens and stuff in France. And then the second campaign is a big whack and break, really where the bombing starts in earnest. You're going deep into Germany, but the problem is you don't have extra fighters coming to help you so much. So they haven't developed the P-51 Mustang, and so as soon as you go 10 zones in, so you're getting Reacher into Germany or to Norway or something, for your fighters, little friends as they're called, they drop off and you're on your own, and you have to like fend off the Luftwaffe by yourself. And then 3, I think then that's when you start getting the upgrade to the B-17G, which is a better version of the B-17F with a turret. I'm going to say a turret on the front nose, so you've got more forward firepower to stop Luftwaffe attacks coming straight in. And then you've got campaign 4, which I'm going to say I think is the 15th Air Force. So the first 3 are the 8th Air Force, based in England, East Anglia, flying out from there. But the 4th campaign is set in Italy, and you're going out of Italy. From Foggia airport, I'm going to get that wrong, and going to attack like oil installations. And I think this is one of the most dangerous missions, and you have to deal with the Alps and freezing cold temperatures and all that sort of thing, as you have to travel through some more long distances. And then you get the B-24, which is more of a long distance bomber. And then 5 and 6, I actually haven't really played much of these, but these are like the late war. You've got, I think, 5 is like D-Day. Yeah, you've got 6th of June there. So supporting the invasions. and then 6 is like the final days of the Reich. So you're dealing with, okay, that the Luftwaffe is diminished, but you're dealing with things like jet fighters and some other like nasty tricks that Hitler's got for you. So let's have a look. Goering there, let me say. So once you've done that, you've picked your campaign. So let's say we pick campaign 2, which is the one I've mostly played. If you've ever seen Masters of the Air, it's kind of mostly set in this sort of era, 1943, where things are kind of a bit wrong for the Bomber Command, not Bomber Command, 8th Air Force. So in this one, you would roll for your type of target. So it's a lot of rolls on tables. It's a D. You've got your 2d10s, d100. So for example, let's roll for you roll for industry. Let's say we go for Antwerp. You roll Antwerp and on industry target, and then what you then do is you go into the Gazetta. It's really incredible the research they've done for this. You know, it's really put above and beyond most games really with this. And then you see in Antwerp, you see the series of zones. So Antwerp's not very far away. So basically what it's saying is -2W, you're going over the channel, that's water. -2 means there's not much Luftwaffe. -1B, we're over Belgium now, and there's still a bit more resistance, and then you're over your target, and a 0, which means there is no penalty to resistance, so you're going to probably get a fair bit of Luftwaffe interference. But that's a nice short mission, I like what we might call a milk run, where it's going to be nice and easy to attack the target and come back. So you want to roll for those if you're lucky, but sometimes you get a really horrible one. Like I got one in Norway, 15 zones, which is the maximum. That's a long way to fly and a lot of Luftwaffe fighters to deal with as you kind of go in, and I was lucky to get back. I actually had to turn back because of a oxygen out. Often you will find mechanical failure or damage will make you turn back before you even drop your bombs. So you fly through the zones, you go to your target, you drop your bombs, and you have to then fly back. And it's the flying back which is often the most stressful part, as your battered bomber tries to make it back and then land, because the more punishment you take, harder it is to land. So that's the general sort of like how you plan the beginning of the mission. So you're already kind of got a fair bit of detail at that point. And then it's just basically you're starting the game, you're then running through a whole series of tables. So I'm not going to go too much into detail about how all of this works, but just to kind of give you the absolute basics of it, you need to pick your position in the formation. Oh, that's something I haven't shown yet. So you've got your formation position, and this is going to affect, you can see like you've got these big formations, and this is going to affect like whether you're going to get more or less fighters, because if you roll to go tail end Charlie, for example, you're going to get an extra fighters to represent you're like on the outside of the formation and thus more vulnerable, so you don't want to roll that if you can. And you've also got some options there if the formation gets disrupted or out of formation. Now the game is really about the individual bomber and its story, and it kind of abstracts the other bombers, but the other bombers can be represented through a group game, which has a sheet actually. I have to be honest with you, I haven't really played it because everything I've read about it is that it kind of adds a whole load of admin to the game, and you know, there's not really much interaction with your bomber, so there's already a lot of admin in this game, so I've kind of avoided it. Something I'll come to maybe in my kind of review section is that I actually feel like maybe it was a bit of a missed opportunity to have some like light group interaction where you don't have to necessarily represent your entire squadron, but maybe what happened to say another bomber then affects your, you know, your chances. It does feel a little bit you're flying by yourself in some ways in this, so maybe a mild criticism there, but it's kind of they really want to focus on the individual bomber experience. Some people actually fly this game as a group, so everyone takes an individual bomber and they kind of do it that way and kind of have a little bit of interaction. There's some online forums where that's run, which is I think is kind of cool. Maybe one day I'll give that a go. So yeah, so this is just this is actually on the other side of the target sheet. I just don't have enough space in the view, so you can see how that would work. And that's for the B-17G, which is the slightly more modern version of the B-17. So yeah, so what we would then do is we start kind of working. We'd have like worksheets to run through. Now, my experience, actually, this is kind of another little slight criticism of the game. I actually have a load of custom charts that I use to play, because I actually found flicking through the book a bit tedious, and like I'm just going to break the book by constantly going back and forth. So there's a really brilliant online community for this game. It's like really above and beyond, and I sometimes think of like it's like one of those video games which has got the kind of solid base game, but the community has like knocked it out of the park to make it something really special. So you know, these tables I find a lot easier to use. They're all condensed, and there's 8. I've just used 8 pages back and forth, and then I can just kind of go through, get rid of them if I'm not using it at the time. So but once again, that is not out of the box. I had to print these, and you could argue they should have had slightly better player aids than kind of having to flick back and forth through a book. And similarly, you actually like do need to do a fair bit of paperwork for this game. So I use this like custom worksheet here. I've used a few other ones as well, mainly using this one to save paper, because I ended up going for like 5 or 6 sheets just to do one mission, and if you're doing a campaign, that just costs a lot of ink and paper. So this one's like really condensed. Now you can kind of lose a bit of story with this one, but this is like the most efficient way of doing it. But the one out of the box, just to kind of give you a comparison, I mean, not to be a bit annoying about it, but this is like, I don't think I even got it, just grabbing it here. It's like something like this. They just don't give you enough information on the sheets, really, to actually log it, and you're having to do a whole load of them. So the actual everyone I've ever seen uses like a downloaded community-driven sheets, and I think maybe they could have put a bit more effort into the actual game player aids and worksheets. Not a big criticism, personal preference more than anything. I mean, similarly, crew management. So I've got some lovely crew sheets here about my crew, and I've kind of managed this all through my own custom downloads from Board Game Geek. And just to kind of further push the point, yeah, I've got like a campaign log, flow charts which I use online to help. And probably just the one I'm missing here is the actual bomber. Here we are. This one's really good. This is to track the bomber damage. You can see there's all sorts of places where you can get hit, which I'll run through in a minute. But these sheets really do give you a full sense of what's going to happen to you in this game. And this once again is a community one. Really useful, but no way this is so much better than the one that's in the box. Yeah, I won't harp on about that, but it is a bit of a criticism of the game. Nothing to ruin your fun though. If you just got this game out of the box, you'd still have a good time. Just maybe on your 10th mission, you might be going, oh god, I need a better sheet to go through. So those are the player aids. So essentially we're going through the game tables, so I'll stick with the actual printed materials. So first off, what we're doing, so we're going to take off, so we've rolled our position, let's say we're going to be middle cell, so we won't have any penalties. In fact, let's go low cell so I can show you how that would work. So that means we're going to get more, and we're going to go tail end Charlie, so we're going to go in probably the worst possible position, low cell, tail end Charlie, and then what we would then do is we'd look at the amount of fighter escort. So you roll this every 5 zones, and that's how many fighters you get, and that changes by campaign. So this is like earlier on in the war, maybe some Spitfires or Hurricanes coming to defend you from the RAF, and then later on you're going to have P-51 Mustangs, and you can see it gets better as the war goes on. So campaign 3 and 4, your fighter covers just vastly better. And then you've got the weather starting at the base. So you have you roll for weather, and this will then have quite a big impact on the mission. So like bad weather is going to scrub the mission, and you would then, and that's going to have an impact on your takeoff. The dates when the mission starts affect this. So winter is obviously going to be worse. Another small criticism: the game doesn't come with a calendar system or anything, so you kind of just have to make up the dates or use a historical log. There are custom ones online. I pick a date and then I just roll a d10 for each mission, so that many days, 6 days, 7 days later. But it's, yeah, once again a small missing element, which would have been nice to have out of the box. Then you roll for takeoff, and then you see if you crash. Not likely, but it could. You could potentially be seriously injured. So obviously not something you would necessarily want. It hasn't really happened very much to me. Some of these chances are very small. And then you take off and you check the weather in the zone as you move into the second zone. So you come out of zone 1. So if we look on the board here, I'm starting on zone 1, taking off into zone 2. And then what we're going to look at is there a mission recall? So basically, is the mission scrubbed because the weather's terrible? It might be on a small percentile chance. And normally that would just mean you kind of that will happen probably quite early some of the time. Can be infuriating. You go 10 zones in and then you get recalled. That's awful. But sometimes you just have to sort of almost start the mission again and then just a day later. And then all adds to that immersion and the sense, you know, of how real this feels. And then probably really interesting, you then have the mechanical failure, and this can in fact impact a whole load of stuff. You can have an engine fire and everything from like oxygen out, superchargers being damaged, and this may cause you just to turn home, and just, you know, you're going to have to leave the formation and leave your buddies to go and finish the mission, or you're going to be, you know, brave or foolhardy and carry on with that mechanical failure. They don't happen very often, but when they do, it sort of feels real. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, not every time it's going to happen, but when it does, and you just have to deal with the consequences of that. Real infuriating ones when it's kind of like the bomb release mechanism or something, which is going to mess up your bombing, and you might have to bomb manually or try and jump, you know, not jump on the bomb literally, but like kind of wrench open the bomb bay. But yeah, the detail, look at the amount of detail here just for that, it's just mad. And none of it's silly, none of it feels half-assed, it's all just someone's done their real research. Steve Dixon, game designer, and he's just obviously got a passion for this subject. Then contrails, which are basically like if you've got the kind of the streams coming behind the bomber, and to show you if you're going to be like, these are like, how do you describe it, atmospheric streams coming out behind, which could be spotted by the Luftwaffe. Doesn't happen if there's bad weather. And then you can rejoin formation if you're knocked out, which we'll come to. Now the exciting part. So we've done a lot of preamble, but this game, I just want to get across how, you know, this is a game about movement over, you know, there's a lot of procedure. It's a procedural game. But then you hit combat, which is really where it gets exciting. So we're probably unlikely to get anything in zone 2. You'd roll for it anyway, but because it's like -2, you're normally over water here, so we'll probably be over the channel. We would then roll to see what the resistance level is based on that, and our escorts, the weather, whether we're in or out of formation, and the general zone modifier would impact the type of resistance, whether it's light, moderate, or heavy, or none. And if it's none, you just skip and you move on to the next area. I tend to get fighters almost every round, and this is another thing people have pointed out, that so just kind of a little history lesson. This game is kind of an update of a game called B-17 Queen of the Skies. I've never played it. It came out in the 80s. I'm, you know, 37 years old, so I've not experienced it. But it's kind of a classic early solo war game, probably one of the first, and it's a real, like, seen as that. And this is like an updated, more detailed version of this. But this game has more fighters in it and fighting, and is more detailed, so it does take quite a long time. And some people just go, you know, no B-17 would have this many fighters, and there are some modifiers in the modified versions of the game which you can find online, which actually reduce that massively or have a different way that fighters are generated. But I kind of like the stress of the endless fighter waves. It's kind of an art. It feels like a heightened version of reality, let's say. And then you work out how many waves, and that's going to be depend on the level of resistance or where you are in the bomber cell. So we're low, so we're going to have more waves. And then so let's say we roll 2 waves, and now we need to work out what's actually coming our way. So we're on campaign 2, and you'd roll d66 on this table, and let's say we'd rolled moderate resistance. So let's say we brought in I'm going to just make it up really, but we look at the result. Let's say you've got 3 ME110s or 1 ME, 2 Focke-Wulfs. So let's take 2 Focke-Wulfs coming in, and you would look at their clock positions, and you would then just bring them onto the board. So I've got a whole load of nice little fighter pieces of cardboard, and this is what's another thing I like about this. The component quality is excellent on this game. So they're not double-sided, but that's nothing really. But yeah, really nice like detailed bits of cardboard, real classic. Kind of feels like you've just gone to an air museum or something. No kind of cartoony art or anything. It's just really nice and realistic. So you look at the clock positions. So let's say we've got 3 Focke-Wulfs, 12 o'clock level, 1:30 high, and 12 o'clock high. So you've got a lot of them coming in the front, which is often what they did. They wanted to buzz the bomber and use their lack of firepower at the front and just come in fast. And then because of the fact we're in the low position, we always have an ME109 coming in level, and so this is a dangerous position for us because we've got a lot of different fighters coming in one position. We've only got so many guns. Sometimes some people modify this so it's not an ME109 that reflects the rest of the group, but by default you get that ME109 because we're in the tail end Charlie position. That's why we're getting the extra fighter. So all of them coming in, you then assign. So this is like these little indicators here. That's the top turret. I don't know if you can see very well. We'd assign the top turret. The top turret would get bonuses at this position, and because it's powered, it gets more bonuses. It's harder to hit at 12 o'clock than it is to hit at 6 o'clock, for example. Easier to hit at 3 o'clock than at 12 o'clock. So you assign your guns, and they've got particular areas they can fire, and there's some kind of cool little detailed limitations. So the 2 cheat guns and the nose gun can't all fire together because you've got the navigator and the bombardier in that compartment, and they can only man 2 guns at once. So it's just little things like that, just really make it feel real. And then you attach I just mark them up, and then at that point you roll off to see are they aces or green, so whether they're elite and whether they're going to be a bit harder to hit and a bit easier to hit you. So let's say this one's an ace and this one's green. It's like 1 to 2 green, 5, 6 ace, 4, 5 not neither. Once again, people vary that up, but I think it works fine because I just don't want too much complexity. The important thing is that you mark your fighters before you work out how good they are, because there's no way that someone trying to spot 12 o'clock high is going to know that pilot, Luftwaffe pilot's any good or not. They're just seeing a fighter barreling towards them. So you mark up your guns, and interestingly you can actually set your tail gun as a passing shot so that it would fire as a fighter comes past and take a shot as they come out the other side. So if you don't have a 6 o'clock target, which we don't here, that's normally a useful thing. And then you would mark off ammunition for your guns, which very rarely runs out, but it can on a longer mission. So it's seems like a bit of unnecessary admin. I don't tend to do it on shorter missions, but on longer missions I do it because it's another thing to manage. And then you roll, so if you hit 2d6, I won't go through, there's a load of different modifiers. Luckily they've made it, once you get it down for the actual hitting the enemy, broadly it's like to do with are they an ace and are they and what clock position, but there are some other modifiers, like kind of a Junkers 88 is a bit easier to hit than an ME109, for example. You do that and then you roll to see if you do any damage. So let me just show you the damage tables here. So this is kind of interesting. So we do the defensive fire allocation, and then we're looking at the damage locations. So Focke-Wulf, for example, is a tough old fighter, so it's quite hard to hit, and on a single gun mount. So, for example, we've got a couple of top turrets with double guns, the twin turrets, and they would do more damage to a to a ME-109, but a single mounting, which most guns are, will do less damage to a Focke-Wulf. So you want to pick your targets that way, and that's one of the more limited. You don't get many choices in this game, and that's one of them. Just making sure you pick the right targets. If your gunner has taken out 5 enemy fighters overall and claimed for them, there's a nice claim system if you want to use it, because no one really knew what they'd hit. So they then, after the battle or the landing, the bomber crew would then do a claims board to see who'd actually hit. And it might be you get half a claim for this fighter and whatever. Bit of detail there again. If they get 5, you become an ace, but that only happens after a few missions, because you need to have taken out quite a lot of fighters to get 5 claims. Anyway, so you hit an enemy fighter, what happens? It can either just be destroyed, which is the best answer, or they can get fighter continues attack, so it carries on with a penalty, or if it breaks off after the attack. Now, why does that matter? You can see this number here, the 3. This indicates how many rounds of fighting it can do. So if the ME-109 doesn't get fighter breaks off, it could actually come round again for another pass. So you want to try and take them out on the first time to try and avoid attrition. So let's say we do an attack. I take out the first Focke-Wulf from my top turret. Brilliant, he's gone. And then we've got a fighter continues attack for this one over here, and we've got breaks off attack over here for the Focke-Wulf over here. That's going to do a whole load of penalties, but they're still going to get a chance. Now this is where it gets interesting. And this Focke-Wulf over here, he's going to attack, but he's green, so he's going to have a penalty as well. So they've all got penalties. They then roll. They're coming at 12 o'clock high, so they're going to have to roll high. I think it's about 9 they need to roll, including before penalties. If they hit me, which they probably won't, but if they do, this is another cool and interesting part of the game. Oh, just to roll back very quickly, if you hit the enemy fighter, there's an optional detail. So let's say, for example, and I don't do this often because it just takes too long, but let's say you hit the enemy fighter, you can then roll and say, you hit this right wing, you hit the nose. Did they bail out? Did the Luftwaffe pilot bail out? All it builds up a story. So if you want to kind of, build a full story of your squadron, it goes to the detail of what actually happens to the enemy plane once you hit it. Great fun if you want to do the narrative mission. The piloting log. This is like my favourite bit of the game, really, because this is where the real stress happens. You then get hit, you work out how many hits you get. I won't show you the table, but you basically does the Focke-Wulf. You run with how many shell hits you get, and if there's any modifiers to that. So let's say the Focke-Wulf hits us, he's got three hits. You then roll on the area, so is it coming from 12 o'clock high? Let's say it is 12 o'clock high. You then roll for the compartment, and then once you've got a hit on there, if it's superficial damage, you can sigh a sigh of relief and you're okay. But if you go to another area, for example, if we're going to let's have a look. If we're going to the pilot compartment, we might hit the oxygen supply. Oh no, that's bad. We're suddenly going to have to go down to 10,000 feet, or otherwise our crew's going to die unless there's an open oxygen position because someone's already dead. So we have to go out of formation. There's going to be more enemy fighters. Do we go home? Do we not? Do our instruments get hit? And that's a whole other section. Does the turret get damaged and be broken for the entire game? Does the heat go out? Are we going to start getting frostbite? Is are the controls cables going to be damaged? So landing's more difficult, or the bomb run's going to be off. All these little details that really can build up over time and create a really interesting narrative. So love that. And then let's say what happens if the pilot gets hit. Now if the pilot gets hit, you then go to the injury table, which gives you even more detail. If you love detail, this game is for you. And this is where it probably gets a little bit grim, but I think once again brilliant. So you roll for your wound. Brilliant. Okay, great. Light wounds, we can still go, but serious wound, we're basically out of action and we're in hospital mode until we get home, and we might survive or we might not, or we're KIA. But if you actually get hit, you've even got the details of what it actually looks like. So you can get hit in the face. Does that face cut, grazed, broke your teeth? And it gets worse as we go through the tables. I mean, yeah, it's pretty graphic, to be honest. You've got abdomen, shattered pelvis, ruptured intestines. I won't go on, but you know, that's the level of story you can tell here. And you know, even down to like what frostbite bits you get. And just gives you the idea of like just how absolutely terrifying it must have been to be in one of these bombers. Whatever you think about, you know, strategic bombing, and you know, there's a lot to think about. The bravery of the crews is kind of inspiring, and just the psychological challenge. I mean, I actually play the game with a modifier where it deals with the psychological stress, because you know, people had real psychiatric breaks with this and turned to alcoholism. So I've got like a way of dealing with that, and you know, they might actually go off for a retreat if they get too much psychological stress, which did happen. I'd recommend the Masters of the Air book if you're ever interested in B-17. Is a really good book, which the TV show, which is also good, Band of Brothers kind of style show, was based on. You can obviously tell my enthusiasm for this one, so I'll try and hurry up a little bit. So we've done the damage, our crew might be injured, and then you just roll to see if there's another pass with the fighters, which there may or may not be. If they don't hit, they just go away, because they have to have hit you to continue the attack. But if they have FBOA, fighter breaks off, they'll go away. But say one of the Fokker Wolves hit me, he can then come around for another pass, and he's got 2 passes for a Focke-Wulf, 3 for a Messerschmitt. So sometimes I like to take out the ME-109s just because they've got more passes. Keep carrying on until all the bombers are gone. Sorry, the fighters are gone. One little thing I might miss to say, they can do a collision check, which is one thing about the game I don't like at all, because it's not kamikaze pilots, but I have lost planes due to being struck by a fighter that's missed and just barreled into me more than once, too many times. Now the chances are really small, but why do you have to roll for it every time? Because everyone forgets. And also, and if it does happen, it's so devastating. It just is just, you know, just like, and it just shouldn't happen. So I actually modify it, so I only have it happen to green pilots who are coming in. So I reduce the chances. It's just not an aspect of the game I think is realistic or enjoy. So, you know, and there are a lot of house rules for this game, because not every element is going to fit for your taste. But it is actually easy to house rule because it's all modifiers and plenty of guidance on Board Game Geek. Okay, so you clear the fighters, there might be another wave, second wave, third wave, and then you move on to the next zone, and you do it all again. And this is great, but I would say if you've got your target of 15, you're going to be pretty tired by the end of this, and your session might have been going on for, I mean, people say 2 or 3 hours basically. I tend to try and take breaks with this game. Like, it's great, like lunchtime game. Do a zone, move on, and then come back. But I don't use the term tedious because I find it a lot of fun. But it's repetitive for sure. And when you've got so many fighters coming in, there's a lot of legwork and bookwork. So okay, finally let's get to this. So let's say our target is in zone 7. We get to the zone. What happens then? You're then looking at bombing the target. So whatever that target is, you then check if the target's concealed based on the weather, and then you roll for flak. So flak is you know, these are guns pointing in the air, and more B-17 pilots and crew were killed by flak than they were by enemy fighters. So it is a considerable thing. And then you roll for the amount of flak over the target. It might be heavy, it might be light, it all depends on where you are and where you are in the position, and if it's clear or not. And then you roll for flak, and I quite like it because you roll 3 times, and it's like each time you can imagine the guns going ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum as it's exploding around you. So you're just hoping not for a double 12, a 12 or a 2, depending on the intensity of the flak. I've not really been hit by flak very much, but when it does hit, it tends to be pretty nasty, because you can get something called a burst-in plane, which basically takes out an entire crew compartment, killing everyone inside, and any systems will instantly fail. So you're probably in a position there where the plane's either going to bail out or you're going to be limping home, and you're not likely to survive. So that comes in, and then you've got the bombing run. So there's a whole load of modifiers for this, loads of stuff. You can go as the lead bomber as well if you've done more than 5 missions. There's also electronic stuff, electronic radar bombing. We won't deal with that here. But what's interesting is that from campaign 2 onwards, the B-17s dropped by lead bomber. So the lead, rather than every individual bomber bombing through their Norden bomb site, the lead would go over the target, mark it up with their Norden, and then they would order everyone else to drop their bombs. And once that was done, it would all be on that. So there was a lot of pressure on the lead bomber, but it meant that all the bombs came down together, which was seen as more effective. But I think accuracy was often off anyway. Yeah, I've often found my accuracy is terrible, and maybe there's another thing for the game. The bombing and the flak seem quite a small part of it. Now, okay, obviously in time they were, but there's not an enormous amount of detail about that. So it'd be interesting maybe if there was some things about what bombs you were bringing, what damage you did to the target, not just if it was on or off target. Now I know that's very difficult for the pilot to know, and I think this game focused on the crew's experience rather than the effectiveness of the bombing. Maybe almost a commentary on how some ways it wasn't very effective. I don't know, maybe that's me reading too much into it. But you then have to turn around, go back through the final zone. You have to go through again, both flak again, slightly less effective, but flak again, and you have to go through another round of fighters, and it's often worse at the target zone, which as it should be. And if you get to Berlin, you've got +1, +2 to the amount of fighters coming in, more flak, horrendous. And then you head back and you do it all again. So you turn your bomb around and you head all the way back, rolling through the zones, any fighters coming in, what's the weather, blah blah blah. Now there's 3 ways this can end. You either get shot down, and you do there's a couple of options there. Now you can get shot down like in the worst possible way. You get hit, for example, your bomb bay where you've got bombs in it, and you blows up the plane, everyone dies. Game ends, start again. You don't want that. Doesn't happen very often, but it's devastating when it does, because you've spent hours writing it all down for the crew. More likely though is you'll get home and you'll land, but then there's a whole sort of sub game of landing, because there's a whole load of things that can affect that landing. If your bombs are stuck on board, you can drop them. That's -4. You might crash the plane on landing. If your control cables are out, your elevators are out, if the pilot's injured, there's lots of, the weather's bad, this can make the landing. So the final landing is one of the most stressful bits of the game, and the game's really at its best. You're limping home, there's 2 or 3 dead crew members, systems are failing, oxygen's out, there's a fire, you're trying to land and you roll that final dice and you're like, if I roll anything but a 10, this is it, it's curtains, and you roll that 10, and that's it's almost a jump in the air moment. It's all random, I know, there's a little bit of skill, but what a story it tells. And then there's even options, and this is just the genius of it. There's options for landing in water and how long you'll survive. If you crash, I think there's even a sub game someone's made for like surviving in the water, waiting for the Navy to pick you up. And that all depends on where you land. Do you land in Europe? Do you land, in Axis controlled waters or Axis controlled land? And then you've also got bailing out, which you can do a controlled bailout where the plane is essentially, in a stable position and you'll just jump out with parachutes. Or you can do an uncontrolled bailout, which basically means the plane's, horrendously crashing. And imagine if you're stuck in your ball turret. There's no way you're getting out of that, and that's an option. You can get stuck in the ball turret and never come out. You can just imagine the horror of this. And then if you do land, if you're landing in the Allied controlled areas, you're probably fine. You can head home and you'll be back to fight another mission within a week. But if you don't, you can end up in Nazi Germany, where you've got a chance to escape and make it to Spain and get out using the resistance, or you get captured and the war's over for you. And that story is there, and you can write all this down and tell the story of your crew members, and it really does sort of feel like it is history. And as a history buff and fan, like this game just really, it's a great educational experience, because I didn't really know anything but the basics of the Bomber War before I played this game, and now I'm not an expert, but I know a bit, and that's really exciting, and it's a great educational tool, to get you into that experience. Just a few caveats. So that's the game. I've not played with the B-24 Liberator. I'd love to. It's just mostly because I haven't printed out all the different extra player aids I'd need. I'm planning to do an Italy playthrough. In fact, I'll just quickly show you. I've got the expansion just ordered, which gives you the planes for the Italy, Hungary and Romania for flying over there. I think they still had Luftwaffe planes, but gives you a bit of flavour, some extra planes and fighters here. So I'm looking forward to doing a B-24 Italy-based campaign with a bit of variety of the fighters I'll be facing. So really excited for that one. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up now and go through some pros and cons. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of this one, but I do think it is a game where you're either gonna love it, or you're gonna hate it. Basically, it's like one of the two. And I think if you enjoy procedural gaming, like as in you don't really care about having too much control of the strategy, this is great. But you need to be used to bookkeeping, charts, and it's all pretty straightforward once you got it down. But it is chart heavy, and I think some people think it's like work. Basically, it's like filling out spreadsheets and forms. But I think that gives you just have to use your imagination, and this kind of gives you the tools and the detail level for your imagination. Now, I love a good Euro game as much as anyone else, but I just feel like sometimes with war games it's so abstracted that you don't really feel you're playing the war game anymore. You're playing something else. And I'm all for innovative mechanics, but sometimes you just want a stone to be a stone or something like that. So yeah, that's just like it's a taste thing. But I think some people have said, and maybe I'd agree, is that this game is so detailed that it maybe just damages the flow a little bit. And the amount of fighters, like the level of detail plus the number of fighters, I mean, maybe there's a bit of a disconnect there between the detail level and the arcadey sense of because no bomber really faced probably 5-10 fighter waves on their mission. Maybe they did once or twice, but not every mission. And I think it can just get a bit attritional. Now I think that's intentional to build tension, but it just takes time. And maybe this game would be better suited if a mission was half an hour rather than 3 hours, especially if you've got to do 25 and you want to try out all the other different campaigns and stuff. So that's a downside, I think. I think it's just a weaker aspect of the game. I think the other thing, as I said, missing tables and references that would have been handy to have. Just they're in the game mostly. Some are missing, as I say, like rolling dates and a calendar. But why are the player aids so poor, compared to the ones online? Maybe it could be slightly better. It just felt a bit of an afterthought to me, maybe. But maybe it's just because the community's that good. It really is amazing, and one of the most engaged I've seen in for a board game. Yeah, so couple there. Now, my kind of personal gripes are to do with my personal taste. I just wish the group game, the other bombers, had a bit more to play with it. There's a really popular mod or variant that essentially brings in a kind of streamlined version of the group game, where if a bomber's being attacked, it will see which of the bombers is attacked, and you might not be that bomber, and it auto resolves that, rather than it being just a percentile chance of whether you're attacked, and the rest is completely abstracted. and that means that there's less attacks on you, but you kind of can see the formation and how that is disrupted. Now, like, just what I found was I don't mind there being the lack of it, but there's just in the group rules there just seems to be something missing on how that affects you. It doesn't seem to matter. You could lose the entire cell of bombers and like you're fine. Now I wonder if that is because I think I read somewhere that maybe they brought in replacement bombers as like, into the formation if ones were dropped out, if we weren't just left by yourself. That doesn't seem quite right, maybe. And there's only one rule I found, which is basically if you're in a disrupted formation or out of formation, you can only rejoin, or it can only become undisrupted again if there is a full cell of bombers. But that's the only rule that connects to the group rule, and it almost feels like there's something missing that maybe they miss. I don't know. Real pedantic detail, but I just don't do the group game because I'm just like, why am I playing a completely separate game that has no impact on mine apart from the statistics at the end, which are just what percentage I've got on target and how many were lost. Okay, if you really want to go to that level of simulation, great, but I'd rather know that, okay, bomber on my in my cell of position 3, he's gone down, and that he's a buddy of mine, I know him, and that's going to impact me in this bomber because now below me there's an opening and there's going to be a Focke-Wulf coming right up at me. Maybe I don't understand enough about B-17 missions, and I'm just misunderstanding. But yeah, that's my criticism for it. That is most obvious to me. Don't like the collision system. I've modified it myself to get rid of it mostly, and I think there could be some streamlining around things on certain aspects of the game, just to speed it up a bit. But in general, this is a unique experience, and I'm really excited to continue playing. I mean, I played this a lot, basically. I played it online. I played it. I've run missions. I've written like battle reports and stories. I've put my friends as the bombers crew, and then I've made up bomber crew. I've run a campaign. It's really, really good, and I just look forward to it every time, which is always proof of a good game. So. And I'm extra grateful for this one because it got me into solo gaming. So I'll wrap it up there, but I'd strongly recommend Target for Today if you're into this type of game. It's not cheap, but no, most of these games aren't. But you get a lot in the box. Like you get a whole experience. It's not just like a game you'll be done with in a day. You could be with this game. You could probably play this game for years and get something out of it. The Gazzetta alone is worth the price of entry. Just the detail of the targets is just mad. So hats off to Legion and Target for Today, and I'm really looking forward to playing Target for Tonight, which is the RAF Bomber Command version with night fighters and all of that stuff. So I've actually got that. I'm going to give that a go. So look out for a playthrough of this one, and like and subscribe and add any comments. I'd be interested to know what you think of the game. And if you've got a different opinion to me, and I'm sure I played a few things wrong in my description. I'm sure I've got some things wrong historically here as well. I'm not an expert, but you know, it just gets you into it, doesn't it? So I'll sign off with that. Cheers.